You betrayed me! Take these!
No, the children! Mommy!
Daddy, stop!
This is your fault!
Please, not in front of them. How could you?
It's over.
Please, don't do this.
I already have.
Mommy, no! Don't let them take us!
Shh, my babies, I'm right here.
I don't want to go.
I won't let them.
It's over. I warned you.
Please, don't do this to us.
You chose this path.
The children need you.
The divorce papers struck Elena's hands so hard that one sheet slipped loose and fluttered across the marble floor. For a second, no one moved. Then Noah began to cry. "Mommy," he whimpered, grabbing the side of her dress with both hands. Sophie threw herself against Elena's arm, her small face already wet with tears. "Daddy, please," Sophie begged, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. Please don't send her away." Daniel didn't even look at his children. He stood at the center of the grand foyer in a dark, tailored suit, one hand still half raised from where he had thrown the papers, his face cold with the kind of anger that comes from pride, not pain. "I said it's over," he snapped. "Sign them and leave." His mother, Vivian, stood near the staircase with thinly disguised satisfaction. "This should have happened a long time ago," she said. "A house like this doesn't need constant tears and weakness." A few feet away, Celeste crossed one elegant leg over the other and leaned lightly against the hallway table, watching like someone enjoying the final scene of a play she had paid to see. "Dragging things out only makes it uglier," she said softly. "This is better for everyone." Elena looked down at the papers in her trembling hands, then at the one page still lying on the floor. Her name. Daniel's name. The end of years of sacrifice reduced to signatures and legal language. Noah wrapped both arms around her waist. "Don't go, Mommy. Please don't go." Sophie turned toward Daniel, desperate and shaking. "Why are you doing this? We didn't do anything." Daniel exhaled sharply, irritated more by the noise than moved by their pain. "This is between adults." "It stopped being only between adults the moment you broke your children's hearts," Elena said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. For the first time, Daniel looked directly at her. "Don't start acting noble now." Vivian stepped forward. "You should be grateful this is happening privately. Some women would be removed with far less dignity." Elena lifted her eyes to her mother-in-law. "There is no dignity in cruelty." Celeste's faint smile tightened. Daniel's jaw hardened. "Enough. Security." Two guards entered from the side hallway. One of them hesitated the moment he saw the children clinging to Elena. The other looked away. Noah cried even harder. Sophie stepped in front of her mother with trembling courage. "Don't touch her!" Elena knelt immediately, gathering both children close. Tears shone in her eyes now, but her hands remained steady as she smoothed Sophie's hair and kissed Noah's forehead. "Listen to me," she whispered. "Stay close to me. Whatever happens, we stay together." "Mommy, are we coming back?" Noah asked. That question nearly destroyed her. Elena swallowed, then rose slowly with the children beside her. She bent to pick up the fallen page, placed it back inside the envelope, and looked around the mansion one last time. The chandelier above, the polished floors, the portraits, the furniture she had chosen, the home she had helped build piece by piece while being told it belonged to someone else. Then she looked at Daniel. He expected a scene, tears, pleading, a bargain, a humiliation he could call closure. Instead, she said only, "The children need their coats." Something unreadable flickered across his face. "Take whatever you brought, nothing else." Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "You're really making us leave?" Vivian answered before Daniel could. "Your father is making a necessary decision." Sophie's mouth trembled. "Then it's a cruel one." Vivian's expression froze. Elena squeezed Sophie's hand gently. "Come on." She walked toward the door with both children beside her, her posture straight, her face pale but composed. The guards stepped aside. Even they could see there was nothing to escort. She had more dignity walking out than anyone in that house had standing inside it. At the door, Noah turned back one last time. "Daddy?" Daniel didn't answer. The massive doors closed behind them with a heavy, echoing finality. Outside, the wind hit hard and cold. Sophie began crying again the second they reached the steps. Noah kept wiping his face with the sleeve of his sweater, trying and failing to be brave. Elena held both of them close on the long stone driveway while the mansion glowed behind them in warm gold light, as if nothing merciless had happened inside. A car waited at the gate. Before getting in, Elena looked back once, not with longing, but with a stillness that no one inside had bothered to understand. None of them noticed it. None of them realized that before the day was over, the first crack had already formed beneath everything they thought they owned. Inside the car, Noah leaned into her shoulder. "Did Daddy stop loving us?" Elena closed her eyes for 1 second. "Your father forgot what love is supposed to protect," she said softly. Sophie stared out the window, fists clenched in her lap. "Then I don't want to go back." Elena turned to her daughter, surprised by the force in those small words. The driver asked gently, "Ma'am, where should I take you?" Elena folded the divorce papers once, neatly, carefully, and slid them back into the envelope. "Somewhere quiet," she said. The city lights blurred past the windows as the mansion disappeared behind them. But while Daniel believed he had ended Elena's life with a signature, somewhere else, something far more permanent was already moving into place. It had not always been like this. There had been a time when Daniel came home exhausted, not arrogant. A time when his hands smelled of printer ink and cheap coffee instead of cologne and power. A time when he and Elena lived in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, where the heater knocked through winter and the kitchen table doubled as desk, dining room, and dream factory. In those days, Daniel had ambition and very little else. Elena had been the one constant. When his first partner backed out, she stayed up all night helping him rewrite proposals. When the rent was due and cash was short, she sold the bracelet her grandmother had left her and told Daniel the next morning that she had found a way to buy him more time. When creditors called, she answered calmly. When employees quit, she filled in. When Daniel doubted himself, she gave him certainty until he could stand again. "You should sleep," she used to tell him, sliding papers into neat stacks while he paced the tiny kitchen. "How can I sleep?" he would say. "If this fails, I lose everything." Elena would look up at him with tired but unwavering eyes. "No, if it fails, we begin again. That's not the same thing." She had her own plans once, her own career, her own quiet dreams. But she postponed them, then set them aside, then stopped speaking of them at all as Daniel's business consumed more and more of their life. She never called it sacrifice. She called it partnership. That was why the betrayal cut so deeply. She had given up so much without ever making him feel guilty for receiving it. When his company finally grew, people called Daniel self-made. Elena never corrected them. At first, she thought humility was a kind of love. Only later did she understand that silence can also become permission. The apartment she rented after leaving the mansion was small, plain, and clean. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a living room with second-hand furniture, and 1 lamp that flickered if turned too quickly. It was nothing like the home she had been thrown out of. And yet, on the first night, After Sophie and Noah fell asleep side by side because neither wanted to be alone, Elena sat in the stillness and felt something unexpected beneath the grief. Relief. No accusations, no measured footsteps in the hallway, no tension hidden behind expensive walls, just quiet. She opened her handbag, removed a slim folder, checked that everything inside was still there, then placed it back without a word. Across town, Daniel celebrated. Champagne was poured in the same house where his children had cried only hours earlier. Celeste moved through the rooms as though she had already inherited them. Vivian discussed redecorating plans with the certainty of someone who believed the future had finally begun to behave properly. "The study should be darker," Vivian said. "More authority, less softness." Celeste smiled. "And the morning room, it never suited the house." Daniel stood near the fireplace, drink in hand, enjoying the ease in the room. "Absolutely. To fresh beginnings," he said. "To losing dead weight," Celeste answered. Glasses clinked. But later that night, after the last guest had gone, Daniel noticed 3 missed calls from a senior executive. One message from legal marked urgent, and an email from finance asking for authorization confirmation on a routine matter that had never required confirmation before. He frowned. By morning, 2 more calls had come in from numbers he recognized, but none had left details. He called his executive team. No answer. He called again. Straight to voicemail. His assistant finally picked up, sounding uneasy. "Sir, they said they would get back to you." Daniel stared at the phone. "Who said that?"
Several of them, sir."
"And what exactly are they waiting for?" A pause.
"I wasn't told."
He ended the call with more annoyance than concern, but the irritation stayed with him all morning. By lunch, a bank representative had requested a private meeting regarding asset governance and account authority. He almost laughed. "Tell them I'll call when I'm available," he said.
"They said it cannot wait, sir."
Daniel hung up and muttered under his breath. Problems had always arrived dressed like emergencies. He had built his life solving them. This would be no different. But by the end of the day, he found himself checking his phone more often than usual. At the apartment, Sophie stood in the tiny kitchen doorway while Elena stirred soup on the stove.
"Mom?"
Sophie asked quietly. Elena turned.
"What is it? Did Grandma Vivian hate you?"
The question was so direct that Elena had to set the spoon down first.
"No,"
she said carefully.
"I think she loved control more than she loved kindness."
Sophie absorbed that in silence. A moment later, Noah appeared holding one of his toy cars.
"If Daddy comes, are we hiding?"
Elena knelt to his height and took the little car from his hand, then gave it back.
"No, we're not hiding from anyone." "Then why did we leave?"
"Because sometimes leaving is how you protect what matters." Noah looked confused. Sophie looked like she understood too much. That night, after the children slept, Elena received a brief call. She listened more than she spoke.
"I understand,"
she said at last. "No, not yet. Let them take the next step." She ended the call and sat for a long time without moving. While Daniel celebrated, someone else was already waiting for him to make one more arrogant mistake. Over the next several days, small things began to go wrong in ways Daniel could not explain. A property tax transfer was delayed. A supplier asked for written authorization from a party Daniel had never needed to mention before. A board member postponed their dinner and then stopped returning his messages altogether. When Daniel stormed into finance demanding answers, The director stood up respectfully, but did not yield. "We're waiting on legal clarification, sir." "Clarification on what?" Daniel asked. "I'm not the right person to explain that." "Then find the right person." The director's face remained polite. "They'll contact you." Daniel went still. "Do you understand who you're speaking to?" The man held his gaze just long enough to be dangerous. "Yes, sir, I do." That answer followed Daniel all the way back to his office. At home, even the staff had changed. The housekeeper who usually greeted him avoided eye contact. The driver answered in clipped, careful phrases. One evening, Daniel walked into the study and found Vivian on the phone, her voice tight. "I don't care what technical issue it is," she hissed. "The transfer was supposed to be completed this morning." She turned as Daniel entered. "What is happening with the accounts?" Daniel poured himself a drink. "Temporary nonsense." "Temporary nonsense doesn't unsettle banks." Celeste walked in behind him. "And it doesn't make people cancel on you." Daniel turned sharply. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, folding her arms, "everyone around you looks nervous except you." That night, Daniel stood by the bedroom window, looking out over the dark lawn. The mansion was silent, but not peaceful. It felt like a house listening. "Why are you staring like that?" Celeste asked. "Like what?" "As if you expect someone to come back." Daniel took too long to answer. The next morning, a legal assistant from his own firm called and asked if he had time for an in-person review. Daniel demanded a summary. The assistant, sounding uncomfortable, said, "It's better discussed formally, sir." Formally. That word irritated him all the more because he could not tell what it was hiding. At the apartment, Noah woke from a nightmare and crawled into Elena's bed, shaking. "Did Daddy throw us away because I was loud?" he whispered. Elena pulled him close so fast he barely finished the sentence. "No," she said, her voice breaking for the first time in days. "No, sweetheart. Never because of you. Never because of either of you." He pressed his face against her shoulder. "Then why did he look at us like that?" Elena had no answer gentle enough for a child. So she kissed his hair and said, "Some people don't realize what they're breaking until it's already broken." The next afternoon, Sophie came home from school quieter than usual. "What happened?" Elena asked. Sophie shrugged at first, then finally said, "Another girl asked if we had to move because Daddy doesn't want us anymore." Elena's face went pale. "What did you say?" Sophie lifted her chin, trying very hard to sound older than she was. "I said my mother doesn't beg people to keep us." Elena stared at her daughter, torn between heartbreak and pride. She crossed the room, held Sophie's face in both hands and whispered, "You never have to beg to be loved properly." Sophie nodded, but tears slipped free anyway. And while Elena held her, across town, Daniel was about to receive the first sign that his control was no longer slipping quietly. The courier arrived just after 10 in the morning. He was older, composed, and carried a cream-colored official envelope requiring a direct signature. Daniel barely glanced at the label before signing with impatient confidence. Vivian happened to be in the foyer. Celeste was descending the staircase slowly, curious enough to stop halfway down. "What now?" Vivian asked. Daniel smirked as he tore open the envelope. Probably another procedural delay. Inside was a formal notice, followed by several attached documents. He read the first page standing casually. By the second page, he straightened. By the third, he stopped breathing for a second. Vivian noticed first. "Daniel?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched. He turned to the next page, then the next, scanning dates, signatures, clauses, authorizations, legal structures he had not thought about in years.
The confidence drained from his face so quickly that even Celeste came down the remaining steps. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel's fingers tightened around the papers. "No." Vivian moved closer. "No what?" He looked up, but his eyes were no longer angry. They were confused, then alarmed, then almost frightened. He read one line again, then another. A transfer. A protective holding structure, controlling shares, property title status, primary asset authority, existing enforcement rights. Celeste tried to take the pages. "Let me see." He pulled them back instinctively. "Wait. Daniel, wait!" That single word echoed through the foyer. Vivian snatched the top page anyway. Her lips moved as she read. Her face turned white. "This is wrong," she whispered. But the legal seals said otherwise. The mansion was not in Daniel's name. The controlling shares of the company were not in his name. Several major financial accounts, holdings, and asset controls he had treated for years as his unquestioned power were not legally his either. They belonged to Elena. Not suddenly, not by trick, not by revenge after the divorce. For years. The realization did not arrive all at once. It came piece by piece, each page undoing another layer of certainty. Back when the company had been vulnerable to lawsuits, advisors had recommended moving major holdings into a safer structure. Elena, trusted and underestimated, had become the legal shield. Later, for tax strategy and long-term control, the structure had been expanded, reinforced, and left in place. At some point, Daniel stopped paying attention to the details because success made him lazy where caution once made him sharp. He had assumed his wife's loyalty would outlive his decency. He had assumed ownership and control were the same thing. He had assumed wrong. Celeste stepped back first. "You're telling me she owns this house?" Daniel said nothing. Vivian's voice rose. "That's impossible." "Read the rest," Daniel said hoarsely. She did. And the more she read, the louder the silence in the foyer became. By noon, Daniel had called 3 attorneys. By 1 o'clock, 2 called back sounding more careful than urgent. By 2, he was in a conference room at his law firm with 5 people in suits explaining the same truth in different language. The documents are valid. There may be narrow procedural questions, but not enough to change control. The structure was extended multiple times with your signature. "I don't remember signing these." One attorney slid a copy across the table. "That doesn't invalidate them." Daniel stared at his own signature. The room felt suddenly too bright. "So fix it," he snapped. "Find a loophole." The oldest attorney folded his hands. "A loophole is not the same thing as a strategy." "Then find both." They tried. That afternoon, there was an emergency call with the bank. The bank confirmed that until lawful authority changed, key transactions required Elena's authorization. That evening, he called 2 board members. One declined the call. The other answered only to say, "Daniel, for your own sake, stop issuing instructions until legal settles this." "For my own sake?" Daniel repeated. "I built that company." A pause. Then the board member answered carefully. "You built part of it." The line went dead. By the next day, Daniel had convened an emergency board meeting. He arrived ready to reclaim control through force of personality, if nothing else. Instead, he found the room already changed. People stood when he entered, but not the way they once had. Not out of deference, out of formality, out of discomfort, out of awareness that someone else, someone absent, someone quiet, someone they had underestimated, now had legal standing none of them could ignore. One executive cleared his throat. "Until ownership authority is clarified publicly, We recommend temporary operational restraint. Daniel laughed once, sharp and bitter. Publicly? Are you all planning to humiliate me? No one is humiliating you, the executive replied. The documents are. Daniel lunged verbally at everyone in reach. The board chair remained calm. Legal remained cautious. Finance remained immovable. Every attempt Daniel made hit another wall. And with each failure, his voice rose a little higher. His power didn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It broke piece by piece. That evening, Celeste confronted him in the bedroom. You told me everything was yours. Daniel ripped off his tie. It is mine. Then why is every lawyer in this city acting like it isn't? It's a technicality. Celeste laughed in disbelief. A technicality that owns the mansion? He turned on her. Do not start with me. She stepped closer instead. I left my old life for this. For me, Daniel shot back. Her expression changed instantly. No, not just for you. He saw the truth too late. At the apartment, Elena met with Mr. Hargrove, the attorney who had handled her matters for years with quiet precision. He placed a folder on the kitchen table. The notice was delivered. Elena nodded once. There will be pressure now. Lawyers, calls, perhaps public sympathy for him. She poured tea into 2 plain mugs. Sympathy is rarely given to women who stay quiet. He watched her carefully. The board would like direction. Some of them have begun asking about you with respect. Elena gave the faintest, almost sad smile. Respect is interesting. People often discover it only after paperwork forces them to. Hargrove nearly smiled, then opened the folder. If you want to assert full public control, you can. No public spectacle. You are entitled to one. I know. You could remove him completely. Elena looked toward the hallway where the children were laughing over a card game. No revenge. Stability first. Employees protected. Salaries protected. No one loses work because 2 adults failed each other. Hargrove nodded slowly. You're remarkably calm. I've had years to prepare my silence. By the end of the week, the company knew. Not through gossip, but through procedure, through signatures, through who could authorize what, through who spoke and who waited. Senior staff who had once greeted Elena politely at holiday dinners now referred to her in conference rooms with something far deeper than politeness. Mrs. Vale, authority holder, primary signatory, majority control. Yet Elena did not arrive at the office in triumph. She came once, quietly, in a simple coat, with no entourage and no speech prepared. When she entered the building, the receptionist stood so quickly she almost knocked over her chair. Good morning, Mrs. Vale. Elena smiled gently. Good morning. Executives who had spent years watching Daniel command rooms found themselves speaking to Elena with a different kind of caution. Not fear, but respect. She listened more than she talked, asked precise questions, protected jobs, demanded no theatrics, corrected no one publicly. And somehow, that dignity unsettled Daniel's allies more than rage would have. After one meeting, a senior operations manager caught up to her near the elevator. I just wanted to say, he said awkwardly, some of us remember who stayed late in the old office before we ever had a proper building. We remember. Elena held his gaze for a moment, moved but composed. Then remember the staff, too, she said. They carried more than people realize. He nodded, chastened. Word of that exchange traveled. So did others. A bank executive apologized formally for previous communications that had failed to include her properly. An outside counsel addressed her as the principal before addressing Daniel. A longtime vendor sent a note saying they looked forward to working under her stewardship. Daniel heard about every one of these things. Each one landed like another small collapse. He tried new lawyers, more expensive ones. Lawyers who promised strategy, timing, pressure, leverage. They reviewed everything, billed aggressively, and eventually told him some version of the same truth. Elena's position was legally solid. He tried appealing to the board through loyalty. The board asked for documentation. He tried pressuring finance. Finance referred him to legal. He tried getting the bank to expedite disputed access. The bank requested Elena's written approval. He drove to the office unannounced one morning and ordered his executive assistant to schedule meetings with department heads. She stood there, pale and trapped. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "Most of them are already in a meeting." "With whom?" She hesitated. Daniel's voice dropped. "With whom?" "With Mrs. Vale." The room tilted. Across town, Elena was helping Noah build a small cardboard castle for school when her phone rang. She looked at the number, then set it face down. "Was that him?" Sophie asked from the couch. Elena nodded. "Are you ever going to answer?" Elena slid a cardboard tower into place. "When there is something left to say." Noah frowned. "What if he says sorry?" Elena smiled sadly. "Sorry matters, but it doesn't erase what people were willing to do before they felt consequences." That night, Daniel left his first voicemail. "Elena, call me." The second was less angry. "We need to talk." The third came after midnight. "I know I handled everything badly." The fourth was almost unrecognizable. "I don't know how this became my life." He called her friends, old mutual acquaintances, an uncle she hadn't spoken to in months, the children's former piano teacher. He drove past the apartment twice before finally working up the nerve to approach. He sent flowers. They were returned. He sent a bracelet. It came back unopened. He sent a handwritten note. Elena placed it in a drawer without reading it until days later. It contained only one sentence. "I did not understand what I was destroying." She stared at it for a long time, then folded it and put it away. Still, Daniel did not stop. One rainy evening, after a disastrous meeting with yet another lawyer who had finally admitted, "You may be able to negotiate with her, but you are unlikely to overpower her," Daniel drove straight from downtown to the apartment. He stood outside for nearly a minute before knocking. When Elena opened the door, Sophie and Noah were visible behind her at the small table, crayons spread around them. All three looked at him. He had never felt smaller. "Can I come in?" he asked. Elena hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry soap. There were children's drawings on the refrigerator, a stack of library books on the end table, a patched blanket over the sofa. It was modest, undeniably so, but it held something the mansion had been missing long before Elena left it: warmth. Noah looked at his father and then at the floor. Sophie did not move at all. "Can we talk?" Daniel asked Elena. Sophie answered first. "Are you here to throw us out again?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly, struck clean through by the question. "No," he said. "No." Elena told the children gently to wait in the bedroom for a few minutes. Sophie obeyed only after looking directly at Daniel, as if promising herself she would remember this moment forever. When the door closed, silence filled the apartment. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, seeming unsure where to place his hands, his voice, his pride. "I made a mistake," he said. Elena looked at him quietly. "That's a very small word for a very large wound." He flinched. "I know," he said. "I know I was cruel. I know I let people poison my mind. I know I became arrogant. I know I hurt the children. I know I hurt you." Elena said nothing. He took a step closer. "I thought success meant I could decide who mattered and who didn't. I thought because you were calm, you would endure anything. I thought because you stayed, you always would." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I know I was wrong." She held his gaze. "Do you know why?" Daniel looked down. "Because I lost everything." "No," Elena said softly. "Because you proved what you would do once you thought you no longer needed kindness." The truth of that sat between them like something too heavy to move. He looked toward the bedroom where the children waited. "I miss them." "They missed you while you still lived with them." His eyes filled. "I'm asking for another chance." Elena's face changed then, but not with anger, with sorrow. The sorrow of someone who had already buried what he was asking to revive. "A chance at what, Daniel?" "At being a family again. At fixing it. At us." Elena took a slow breath. "A family is not a word you use when the lawyers fail." He winced as if struck. "I loved you," he whispered. "I believe that once you did. And now? Now I understand something I should have understood sooner." Her voice remained gentle, but every word held. "Love without respect becomes a slow humiliation, and I will never live inside that again." He shook his head, desperate. "People can change." "Yes," she said, "they can. But change does not obligate the wounded to return." He stood frozen. "I am sorry," he said again, and this time it sounded real. Elena nodded. "I know. But peace is not built by walking back into the place that broke you." Tears slipped down his face. He didn't wipe them away. "You're really done." Elena looked toward the bedroom, toward the children, toward the life she had rebuilt without revenge and without spectacle. "I choose peace," she said. That was the end of it. Not because she hated him, because she no longer belonged to his chaos. The children healed slowly. Noah stopped asking whether he had done something wrong. Sophie stopped sleeping with the hall light on. They found a new rhythm: school, dinner, homework, weekend walks, grocery trips where Noah insisted on carrying the apples. Evenings where Sophie read beside Elena on the couch just to be near her. Months later, when Elena moved them into a brighter home with a small backyard and enough room for laughter to travel without hitting walls too quickly, the children began to soften in ways she had prayed for but never expected soon. Noah learned to ride a bicycle there. Sophie planted flowers by the porch. On spring evenings, Elena sat outside with tea while the children played in the grass, and sometimes she would look at them and think not of what they had lost, but of what they had escaped. As for Daniel, his downfall did not end in one dramatic ruin. It lingered. Celeste left when she understood there was no empire waiting for her, only scandal, instability, and a man too damaged by his own pride to rescue anyone. Vivian withdrew from social circles she once ruled so confidently, unable to bear the quiet humiliation of knowing she had helped destroy the only person in that family who had ever held it together with grace. Daniel retained pieces of his old life, but not the illusion that had once animated it. He walked through expensive rooms feeling the absence of what mattered. He attended meetings where people listened politely instead of obediently. He looked at contracts now, read every signature, asked questions he once thought beneath him. But the knowledge came too late. The children no longer ran to him. Elena no longer waited for him, and respect, once shattered so publicly, did not grow back simply because regret had appeared. One evening, long after the worst of it had passed, Sophie sat beside Elena on the porch swing and asked, "Mom, were you scared that day?" Elena looked out at the fading gold across the yard. "Yes," she said honestly. "Then how did you stay so calm?" Elena smiled faintly. "Because the moment I saw you and Noah crying, being afraid stopped mattering more than protecting you." Sophie leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't let him see you break." Elena kissed her hair. "Strength isn't never breaking, sweetheart. It's choosing what pieces of yourself no one gets to keep." Inside the house, Noah called for help with dessert, and Elena rose, laughing. There was no mansion behind her now, no marble staircase, no audience, no performance of status. And yet, she had never stood in a richer life. Daniel would spend years remembering the sound of those divorce papers striking Elena's hands. He would remember the tears on Sophie's face, Noah's shaking voice, Elena's silence, and the calm in her eyes that he mistook for defeat. He would remember the envelope, the letter, the pages that turned certainty into panic. He would remember every failed attempt to undo what arrogance had allowed. And he would understand, too late, that the moment he thought he had won was the exact moment everything truly valuable began slipping beyond his reach. Because in the end, Elena did not defeat him with revenge. She defeated the cruelty that tried to define her by refusing to become cruel herself. She chose dignity over noise, peace over performance, self-respect over return. And while those who humiliated her were left staring at the ruins of what they thought made them powerful, Elena walked forward with her children into a life built on something far stronger than wealth. A love no one could throw out, and a peace no one could take back. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.